And this part's a little teary eyed, and then like when the main event was done, I went and grabbed my baby doll, which I'd kept with me my entire life. I still have him. And I ran to my closet as a 33-year-old man. I cuddled up in the floor, holding my baby doll, screaming for my dad for an hour until my voice was hoarse. And I'm
Wow.
reliving it again. And then all of a sudden, I felt this presence come down. Literally, the presence. It wasn't God. It wasn't Jesus. It was a real being came down and picked me up from my body and removed those memories and put me back in.
This is the Green Beret, where warriors talk about the weight they've carried.
Okay, welcome back to the Awake Green Beret podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Butler, and today we have a really special guest with us, Paul Miller. Paul and I got acquainted not too long ago. We connected through social media, kind of the key word being awake. Paul is also a veteran, and we're going to dive into his story and his unique gifts and some really fascinating alignment here on multiple levels. But before we do that, a quick word from our sponsors, as you know. All right. So again, this is Larabelle and the Crazy Tree. It's a story geared towards, young adult or young kids. It was co-authored by my wife, and 100% of the proceeds of this book go to Donor Connect, where we sponsor that nonprofit, or we support that nonprofit. When our son passed away, we donated all of his organs and were able to save 6 lives. So we're a big fan of them. So again, 100% of the proceeds from this book can go to that nonprofit. All these can be found in Amazon. The next book is mine, From Green Beret to Shamanism, One Man's Journey to Heal. And the nonprofit that this supports is Natural Worship, which is our plant medicine church, which 100% of the proceeds go to putting veterans through ceremonies. And then finally, Olipop. We're big fans of Olipop here on the show. To me, it's the solution for soda. There's only, I think, 4 grams of sugar, so you don't have the risk of diabetes and all the problems that we have with sugar in our modern day diets. And there's also no artificial sweeteners, colors, or preservatives, so you're also not running the risk of cancers. And it's a probiotic, prebiotic, gut health focused drink, which helps us maintain the serotonin, which helps us makes us happy. So here's the Olipop. I'll be drinking cream soda today, my absolute favorite flavor. All right, with that, over to you, Paul, for an introduction.
Well, my name is Paul Miller. Like you said, I'm a veteran. I was in the Army National Guard for 16 years. I was medically retired with a rare disease called transverse myelitis. I was raised Christian, conservative in the Bible Belt. I was homeschooled also. That was a experience of itself. Did several tours overseas. Um, Multiple traumas throughout my life, and spent over a decade working on the inner work, healing, just seeking. I didn't like how I felt. I was just almost desperate. Smoked weed 24/7 for a very long time. That's the last couple of years in service, I was smoking weed. I was an instructor at times, did support work. I talked to you about that some. And I was smoking weed there, and that helped with alcoholism. But basically, like, my life came to a head where I was crashing down internally, and I'd just been seeking healing so long. And ultimately, like in 2023, I had a spiritual awakening. No, 2022, and it still feels weird to talk about it. Like I'm still 4 years later processing it, and just mentioning it in a casual conversation almost is like there's these internal blocks of like, what will Christians say? What will other veterans say? But I've come to the point now where I have to learn to own it. Like, it happened. It is what it is. The whole world can invalidate me, but the truth of the matter, I still experience that, and nothing can change that.
All right. I want to just circle back to, I appreciate what you shared there. I appreciate your story. I want to circle back to the traumas. You said you suffered a lot of traumas, which, we all do. But do you feel like, would you be willing to share a little bit more about that, going into that, talk about a little bit about what specifically you were suffering? And if you would, was there a rock bottom for you? And if so, what was that like?
And I the reason why I want to share now is because there's hopefully somebody watching that's been through these things and they can see somebody on the other end put together. And yes, I had multiple rock bottoms, I would say. It's like I would think I couldn't get lower and I'd be like climbing my way out of that black pit and like something would slip and I'd fall back down. I'm like, dang it.
Yeah.
Um, it's like literally internal despair. Um, so my traumas started at a very young age. I had sexual trauma as I was like 3 or 4 when I'm trying to use language that's not triggering, but I was accosted by an adult. And that memory got completely repressed until I was about 32 or 33. But it fractured me.
Yep.
It fractured me to where I was just a people pleaser, where I was always reading adults. And I became the perfect victim because I was in a an environment with no oversight. There was no checks and balances. The adults did whatever they wanted to be. So I had family members that sexually abused me, women. I had men sexually abuse me in public places. This was in the 80s. And I would just go into disassociated mode where my identity would unplug and I was just a blank slate and they got to do whatever they wanted. The thing is, though, those memories are still being recorded, but they're not connected to that identity that checked out,
Mm.
but they're still there
Yeah.
and they come back eventually. And so I believe that in the process of being a human, when you get to a certain age and a maturity level, those memories have to unlock. Either you, because that's part of your character, part of your experience. And either you repress it and you get stuck in that, or you embrace it, process it, and you keep growing as an adult. And I don't mean like adult as in the word, but like an oak tree growing.
Mm-hmm.
If an oak tree has these like binders on it or these little tethers to keep it upright and it tries to grow, it's going to get warped because that stuff is pulling it into the past. But it needs to be disconnected so it can fully flourish and be what it's meant to be.
Yeah.
So I was homeschooled and I was basically in prison, in my opinion, away from the world. I wasn't taught. I didn't learn much of anything at all because it was you sit in front of this book for like a bunch of hours and you get in trouble if you don't do the math. And so it was just a terrible experience. My mother was a covert parasitic narcissist, which she like, it's basically somebody that feeds off somebody's pain. They feed off of
Yeah.
them energetically. And so externally, she was this great homeschool mom that went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, sang in the choir, great Christian externally. But at home, she was a monster. Her mother dealt in the occult. I truly believe with all my heart, my mother dabbled in witchcraft. In the last 6 years, there's been a resurgence in witchcraft.
Yeah.
It's become mainstreamed. But in that era, it was very hidden, but it never died away. It just stayed in the background. Like you have the Freemasons. I don't know what your affiliations are. I don't know if you're a Freemason or not,
No.
but you have the Eastern Stars also. They deal in work that's not the best, craft work. They call it craft work. So my grandmother would like hypnotize me and stuff and have me do stuff. She molested me or more than molested me also. And my mother just viewed me with contempt for 18 years and treated me like trash. So my self-worth was that less than an end table on a couch. I felt less than that. I was just a pathetic human for existing. So then on my father's side, they were all Freemasons going back from when from when the family line came from overseas.
Hmm.
Here, Freemason, Freemason, Freemason. And I will be honest, those are cruel, manipulative men that do some really messed up stuff, very messed up stuff. And I can say this because I know about them. I lived with them. I was around them for many years.
Yeah.
So it was basically you had this Freemason family bloodline and this witchcraft slash like dealing in the occult bloodlines connecting where
Mm.
I came along because they both deal in the spiritual realm and they seek out spiritually gifted people to basically get them off track, in
Yeah.
my opinion. So I saw the military as an escape. And also, my father he was very rough and like he abused me physically, like with a belt. Just because it says it in the Bible doesn't make it okay. You
Yeah.
know, it's like there was times when I had bruises all over me and we couldn't go to evening church because people would have seen the bruises. And he didn't, and Freemason, he denies it, denies it, denies it. Like I realize people that will abuse a child have no problem with hurting that person as an adult, trying to mess their life over. So, um, I had all these repressed traumas that I never had counseling for, never dealt with, no apologies. My only um, recourse was my mind blocking those memories for me. Because if I stayed in that, I don't know, my mind is a wonderful thing and it blocked those until I was ready for it.
Yeah.
But there was a whole side of my personality that was repressed because I never could be myself. And I was always forced to do what they want, believe what they wanted, wasn't allowed an opinion or allowed my own autonomy with my emotions. So there was a whole side of me that I was repressed and locked out, just like with this sexual abuse from my mother and other people in my life. Sex was never mentioned in our family. It was never taught. It didn't exist. If you talked about it, you got in trouble. Because if I learned about it, then all of a sudden I would have this reference and framework like, you did some dirty stuff. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
it's not funny, but it was kept from me so I wouldn't know what they did.
Hmm.
I wouldn't have a reference point. So, anyway, go to war. So now you got this hurt little boy that's wounded that becomes a soldier. I have the ego of a soldier. And I was extremely compliant in basic training, so obedient. Like I obeyed everything they did, they said, but I couldn't run fast enough. So I didn't obey that, I guess. I became a soldier, so that was cool. But I still had this wounded little boy inside of me. So later on, what I learned is as I went through war, and my middle tour was pretty good. Like when I say good for an infantryman, it was like I experienced combat in a pretty rough area. It was Yusufia, the Triangle of Death in Iraq in 2005.
Like Baghdad, Fallujah.
It was the gateway to Fallujah.
Yeah, exactly.
It, it was it was a hotbed.
And you were
It was
there when?
awesome. 2005.
Yeah. Okay.
It was, and I'm so glad I did as an infantryman because I got to experience what my job was supposed to be.
Sure. Yep.
It was, I would not change it for the world. So as the years progressed, being a soldier, going on tours, my first marriage failed because I was gone so much. Like I was gone for years. I would come home for like 8 to 9 months and be gone for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And in my mind, it's like I made an oath and I was a soldier first. So that gets priority over my marriage.
Yeah.
And I was raised in a family where I had no context of being raised as a man and how a man should treat a woman or how a woman should treat a man. So I was just winging it. I had no idea. I was like a blank slate in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
I realized like the war was really messing with me. I got deep into alcoholism during and while my first marriage was ending. And I was working at that shooting school I told you about then. So that was good. Diving deep into alcohol, taking any pills I could, just trying to run from everything and numb it. And my family, they were no help during this time. They they made it worse for me. They were not loving and caring, just like, how do we help? It was like, you're not good enough. You shouldn't be having these problems. I'm like, well, y'all never been to war, you know?
Yeah.
Like, so F off.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to wrap this back around. I get a disease called transverse myelitis, and it's a swelling in the spinal cord from C1 to C5, but different location for different people. Started losing the ability to walk, got put in the hospital. A few months later, I had to learn to like go to rehab to walk again. A lot of my muscles had atrophied, and I was making progress, getting better. And during this time, all of my mental guards were just dropped because I was so broken in every way, shape, and form with this disease. It was one of the most, I don't know, like my threshold for pain was reset, and I became very intimate with what pain truly was.
Wow.
Like, so, and I learned to meditate during this time because
Mm.
that was my only escape because my body was my prison.
Yeah.
So a few months later, get home, doing pretty good, and I start having these seizures. I'm like, what's wrong now? So I go to this neurological clinic, have a sleep study done, and they're like, you need to go see a psychologist because these look like repressed memories. This is a pseudo seizure. It's like, what? It's like, well, there's a memory trying to come out,
Wow.
but it's presenting as a seizure. You're not losing consciousness. You're fully alert.
Yep.
So that was literally the key to unlocking that. The next time the seizure kicked in, I didn't fight it. I told myself, this is a memory and I'm going to let it happen. I'm not fighting it because as a soldier or not a soldier, like because of the fight in me, if a seizure come along, like I'm trying to control the muscles, I'm like, I'm not going to go. But then I just let it go and let it happen. And I start reliving the memory of being raped as like a 3 or 4 year old.
Mm.
And it lasted like a very long time. So imagine like you have a player piano and this piece of music gets put on it and it plays.
Mm-hmm.
My body was responding and I was acting it out basically. It was
Wow.
fu- I'm not gonna curse. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
It was the worst experience of my life, relived as a 33-year-old. That took a long time and my wife is sitting there watching it and I'm on the floor in the corner of the kitchen screaming, kicking, and like as a grown man, like just battering this cabinet door, just screaming no, just nonstop for like a long time. My wife is calling my counselor. She's like telling me to stop. I have toddlers in another room. And here's dad on the floor screaming. And this part's a little teary eyed. And then, like, when the main event was done, I went and grabbed my baby doll, which I'd kept with me my entire life. I still have him. And I ran to my closet as a 33-year-old man. I cuddled up in the floor, holding my baby doll, screaming for my dad for an hour until my voice was hoarse. And
Wow.
I'm reliving it again. And then all of a sudden, I felt this presence come down. Literally, the presence. It wasn't God. It wasn't Jesus. It was a real being came down and picked me up from my body and removed those memories and put me back in.
Wow.
And I felt it. And right when that happened, like I got up and just walked out of my closet like everything was fine. It never happened. That was my fracturing.
Mm.
That was the moment where part of me was removed until I was ready for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that led me down literally another 6 to 7 years of healing. The true work then began
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, now I'm going to confront my family because I'm not going to keep secrets anymore.
Yeah.
Now I know, and I got to get better for my family because I was a basket case. 1 minute I'm yelling, 1 minute I'm crying, 1 minute I'm laughing, like just all over the place. So, and I started smoking weed. I was self medicating. And from my time in the hospital, they'd send me home with all this pain meds and I'd flushed it eventually because I'd started taking like, is it hydrocodone or oxycodone like 2 or 3 times a day. And I was effed up all the time. One day I was driving to the gym on it because I'd started working out on my own to get stronger again after the hospital. And all of a sudden, my breathing almost turned off. I
Wow.
was on those pills and I could not control it breathing. My breathing was so shallow, it scared me. So I went home and flushed all those. I started smoking weed, and that would help while I was high. But when I was not high, I'm back to the old me, just
Mhm.
all effed up. So I go several years, like I went to this place called River Oaks, which is an in therapy place, which I needed because I'd went to my mom's trailer and I trashed it because I'd confronted her about it. She shut down and wouldn't say anything. I talked to my brothers and my dad about it. They called me a liar. Then they stopped invite me to family events. They cut me out of the family. They're like, nope, not gonna have anything to do with Paul because he's telling these secrets, you
Yeah.
know, of how we abused him as a child. So that's the way a family system works. That scapegoats a kid is that they just, if you don't comply with the family, then they're
Mhm.
going to push you out and they're going to treat you like trash. And the goal is for you to crash out and burn your life up so they can sit back and be like, oh, look at him. See, he just was never a good enough Christian.
Yeah.
So I go to River Oaks. I go work on my rage cycle because I had rage, pure unadulterated rage. And when I would get to that point, what sucked is my wife knew how to trigger me to get into a rage. My dad did, my mom did, and they literally enjoyed it. Like,
Yeah.
and my wife would do this too. Like, just fucking evil.
Yeah.
Sorry, there, drop that F bomb.
It's okay.
And it was great going through the rage cycle. I was making all this progress, doing really good, healing up. And in 2020, my wife leaves with the kids. So there's another trauma. Like, so then I think I got to the point I was telling you how I got to the point where it's like, I'm just going to take action all the time. And so I started college, I started a business, sold my house, got another house to work on remodeling. And so I was just going full steam. I was like, I need to go into combat mode. I fully convinced myself I was in combat to get that energy level I needed all the time. And so I was just going, 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 going. And I finally started just realizing, I guess internally, I wasn't happy with who I was. And I started asking myself, like, what would it mean to be like, to become who I wanted to be or like the character that I am?
Yeah.
Because I'd never analyzed myself in my life, really looked back and be like, who am I? What does it mean to be who I am? Why am I the way I've become? And can I change?
Yeah.
And so now I can put those questions together, but then it was a feeling I was looking at. And that brings me up to about the time where I started having the spiritual awakening
Yeah.
and these supernatural experiences that were, I would get home at night or at night, I'd be in my bed just frazzled from these 3 months of like daily, like just roller coaster ride. And I would be like, this is so awesome. My life got awesome. It was so cool. And then, like, everything shut down. Like, all the I can only guess, like, in a ceremony that you do, your consciousness is expanded. You
Yeah.
gain this window, and the veil is lifted, and you can access all of this spiritually, or the unified film realm, or the unified field, there we go, or the spiritual realm, or the reality that's on the other side of this construct where our soul resides.
Right.
And everything collapses back in. And I pulled back in. I was like, what? It was all quiet. It was just nothing happened. I was like, what do I do now?
Mm.
I realized like I have to change to become the character that I'm meant to be. Because so far I was a program basically. I was programmed how to treat people, how to react. I was programmed how to dress, where to look for validation. And the way I like to see it is I was a pinball in a pinball machine
Mm.
getting bounced around. And then I was shown and shifted like now I was the pinball machine and life was the pinball. Like I got to
Yeah.
choose how to live life. And that's when the real work began.
Yeah.
Is I call it is my rebirth basically,
Mhm.
literally. So yeah, that's kind of an overview of that.
Yeah, man, thanks. Couple notes here. I kind of want to go back and revisit. I really like how you described it as a fracturing. I don't know if that's like deliberate on your part, like the use of that word, or if it was just coincidental. But that's something that we talk a lot about on this show, and like I talk a lot about on my social media platform is the idea that psychology calls it like fracturing is a good word, but they'll also sometimes call it disassociation, which I heard you use as well. And then shamanically, we call that soul loss. And then the process of recovering it is soul retrieval. And in my opinion, soul retrieval is probably one of the most valuable tools in the healing journey because you're absolutely right to use those words. Like when we fracture and when we disassociate, when we lose that part of our soul, the ego is stepping in and saying, okay, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to protect this part of you that's being damaged by this trauma, by this abuse. And I'm going to allow you to disassociate. I'm going to allow you to go to a different place. I'm going to help you go to a different place so that you're not suffering throughout this. And so in some respects, I always want to give a bit of a, nod, so to speak, I guess, or credit to the ego, because the ego sort of gets such a bad rap in our society. That person's egotistical, that person's nothing but ego, that person, whatever. It's like, yeah, but well, that might be true. Like, our egos are an important, valuable part of us that keep us safe. And so thank you for sharing that. Thank you for bringing that into the conversation. I really also appreciated the part that you talked about where your body, where you were lifted out of your body, the memories were wiped, and you were placed back in your body. Now, what I really liked about that is like you and I sitting here having this conversation, I wouldn't, I don't even bat an eye at that story. Like I know that that happened. I know that that's true. I know that those are the types of experiences that, many are having, more and more are having. And I guess I wanted to highlight it for our audience to simply say, like this is one of those things that I call ineffable. Ineffable is a word that means there's no words to describe it, right? But there's this deep knowing like in your DNA. Like the way you described that, like I just knew like all my memories, I knew that there was a being there. I knew that I was lifted out. I knew that my memories were wiped clean. I knew that I could, was placed back in my body. Like that's the thing that's really hard, I think, sometimes in this space is to describe to other people our experiences. And if they haven't had an experience like that themselves, like they're so quick to write it off. And my invitation to those listening is like, don't be so quick to write it off. Like those experiences are real. They're hard to describe, but you come away from them knowing that there's never been anything that you've known any more than your life than this. Would that track for you?
Because the soul is far more real than this temporary existence.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this may be a subject that some people may not have delved into, but reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
Your soul is far more real. And when you experience things at the soul level,
Yeah.
then you have context of other people's stories. And it's just like up until a certain point in my life, if people talked about stuff like that, I dismiss it immediately.
Yeah.
Even though my first out of body experience I was 12 or 13 years old. And that was fascinating. But yeah, until somebody experiences something supernatural, they have no lens or context to
Right.
view somebody else's because so much of this world dismisses all that as fantasy, fairy tale, and religion
Mm-hmm.
says anything to do with that is the devil.
Yep.
When in reality, religion hijacks spirituality and wraps it in a structure.
Yeah.
And then with the fracturing, it's a very real thing because like we do have the ego and I call it a character reel. And when my third eye was awakened during my awakening or opened up, which I'm still processing saying that just in a regular conversation, I got this inside view of what's going on inside the mind and how the character, the ego, the mind, and the brain and the soul function together.
Yeah.
It's this complex thing going on. And the way I saw it was that with the fracturing, there's this evil and good side. We have the yin and yang,
Yeah.
where the dark, evil side that can endure anything almost. It's like when you go to war, you know how you can go to a dark space in your mind. Your
Yeah.
humor gets dark. You laugh at the most atrocious things and you just embrace that darkness
Yep.
and you pass through that period very well. So with the yin and yang, we have the darkness, but with fracturing, can fracturing in a specific way because this is an art form in the occulted teachings and rituals.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back to Egyptian times. They would fracture a pharaoh from a very young age so they could switch that personality and they would bring them up to put them in power. But the fracturing was done by the ones that were closest to that pharaoh, the advisors. So he would never, ever, ever not do what they tell him to do.
Right.
But then they would trigger him. They could trigger him with smells, with certain musics. Like this is an ancient art.
Yeah.
And they would trigger him when he was in the authority position to play that role, that character, firm, solid, stout, going to say this edict or whatnot. But then in private was back to just the good side as in a people pleaser and would only obey because at this deep level, the subconscious knew that these were the people that hurt so bad as a child. I better only do what they say.
Yeah.
So it was their form of controlling these people in authority. And so I was in meditation, and a lot of my meditation came when I was deep in a workout. I would get so hard in a workout. I would be deep in my mind. This was during my awakening. And this is visualizing what I saw in my mind. There was this black shadow sitting in a corner in my mind that was just sitting there. And I was like, where the fuck are you? Like,
Yeah.
why are you there? I was like, basically, it was this now. I was like, you're safe to come out
Mm.
because that was my fractured side. That is triggerable. That was my rage side that would be triggered. So here's like down a rabbit trail. And if you want me to stop rabbit trailing, I will.
No, no.
When a child is fractured, it can be done on purpose and then triggered that side, which is a blank identity now that has no identity. Be like, okay, we're going to train you in this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And then they put him back in that other version because those sides don't know of each other's existences. So then there was a whole side that can be triggered. And so I started, and even now, like have to hold back a lot. So maybe offline with you one day, I'll go into more detail, but I saw this other side of me. It was like, I guess metaphorically, the image was shown to me in my mind of like, oh, there's this other side. And I had to start understanding like, this is why I was always a pushover. This is why I wouldn't stand my ground because my firm side or my dark side was totally separate from me internally. But I had to integrate my darkness and my light because you can't exist without good and you can't exist without evil. But as a person, I can't be all good. If I'm a people pleaser, that makes me just a crappy person.
Yeah.
But if I'm all good, that makes me a crappy person. But if I'm a good person that presents my character as being kind and nice, but there's a firm side when I'd use kind and niceness to say, here's my boundaries, that firm side can be felt and will step up as well. So it's just this integration of, and it's not even, it's almost like our parts, but it's our existence, a part of our humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And the part of the downside of this, if somebody's watching and you're going through stuff like this, be careful who you tell about this. My ex-wife, when I had learned in that place called River Oaks where I was doing the rage cycle and learned about the hurt, wounded inner child, and I told her I had different parts and I tried to explain it to her, she used that in court to help take my kids away by saying
Yeah.
I had dissociative identity disorder, which was not true.
Yeah.
I was trying to explain to her parts and she took with that and run it 'Cause so there's people out there that are looking to your downfall sometimes,
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
will use your healing journey and your traumas against you.
yeah, yeah. Sadly, you're not the first person that I've spoken to that's had similar experiences, and I think that's a really great point that you make that I really want to emphasize for our listeners is like, our spiritual journeys are very sacred. Our awakenings are very sacred, and I have that same problem. Like, there's a part of me that just wants everybody I mean, everybody in the world, but more particularly everybody in my circle to get it, to see it, to experience it, and to the point of oversharing. I won't get into any trouble by saying this, but my wife has not had one. And, she'll often, tell me like, okay, we're going out with friends. Can we not make this about your spiritual awakening tonight at dinner? I'm like, yeah. Okay. Message received. I got it. Yep. We'll talk about, the weather and vacations and whatever else. But yeah, like to me, in some respects, like a spiritual awakening is, in some ways it's a burden. Like I often theorize, I often go into sort of like, theoretical space and fantasize about what it would have been like if I'd never had my spiritual awakening. And would I be better off or worse off and things like that? I mean, ultimately, I think I'm better off for having had it, but it can be a burden. It can be lonely.
It becomes the center of your universe. You are awakened to a whole side of reality that most people never experience that other side.
Yeah, yeah,
And for me, I started walking as a multidimensional being, that I have a soul in the spiritual realm. I have a body in the three-dimensional realm. There are happenings in the spiritual realm. Like there is a lot of happenings there that affect
yeah,
us energetically. And I overshared with people. I told you this on the phone. I lost most of my military contacts because I overshared.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, same too. Yeah, like that was one of the things that you and I shared in common is, like we both came from, military, army, um, special operations. You worked with special operations. I was in it. And for me, like that was a big part of my decision making process was like, am I really gonna, put the book out there, like from Green Beret to shamanism? Come on, man. Like I'm sure that most of the people I served with, most of the people that I went to combat with probably scratch their head and go like, okay, really, dude? Which at a certain point, I felt like, Source was asking me to write the book, and so I followed through with it, despite the fact that I was probably oversharing. But at the end of the day, like, I think that it was more important for me to write the book than it was to not, and to be okay with, like, losing the friends or losing the, acquaintances that would probably question my sanity at this point. Which brings me to the point you made about like there's a lot going on in the spiritual world that most people are completely unaware of. Like I have a hard time sometimes, and here I go, I'll probably overshare here. Like but the reality like that sometimes I'll see things like, fairies in our yard or different creatures sometimes like I'll notice people who've transcended, people who are not transcended, but people who've transitioned, who've passed on. Like I was out working, doing some boat maintenance the other day on my boat, and I caught out of the corner of my eye somebody standing there watching me, and I was like, "Oh, there's a spirit here watching this," and because they're more commonly seen in the peripheral, and if you try to make direct eye contact with them, they're definitely they usually flee, disappear, and so I was just kind of like in the corner of my eye, noticing that there was a person there, and I knew that it was a person that had passed on because where they were standing, there wasn't physical room for a human body to be between my boat trailer and the wall that it was, and I was just like, okay, it's just another day in Matt's life. It is what it is. Um, But yeah, like you said, it can be a really lonely place. So, maybe that's part of the reason that we're having these conversations and inviting people more into the conversation and putting it out there on the social media platforms so that other like-minded people going through the similar experiences can find, a safe space to talk about this stuff. So, I'll kind of put a pin in that, so to speak, to invite people to comment below on this episode. Like if you're having these experiences, if you have questions, if you're having, if you're feeling like you have, it's you need direction, like please know that there is safety in numbers, that there are people out there who are going through it with you, and that we can support one another.
So, in response with what you're saying about oversharing, it is a very lonely journey. And this is going to get a little bit into the spiritual. And I believe that veterans are specifically being awakened to
Yeah.
bridge the spiritual with the three dimensional in a grounded way that can be received.
Yeah.
Because if I had dreadlocks, my beard was out, my clothes were tattered, and I was saging everything right now, and I'm just like, just totally because humans, like police officers, they drive through town, they're constantly stereotyping, like, do they fit this profile? Do they fit this profile? Humans see the hippie, profile them, and ignore them if
Yeah.
they're of the more disciplined version or the higher of humans are the most highly trainable species on the planet. And so the ones with the higher level of training dismiss the
Yeah.
ones they view as lower level that are probably far more connected to their humanity
Yeah.
for sure. And they've let go of the ego of trying to perform and cultivate themselves in a manner that's receptive in society. So they're rejected. But we are here, and this is in my spiritual learning and I've gotten a little more serious about it, but taking it in a fun way. The age of Aquarius is a shifting of energies in the universe. And that's a whole nother topic to discuss. But people are awakening because I believe that source, some people call it source, spirit, God, Amun Ra, the all, whatever the word is that associates their knowledge with a being that guides everything or the intelligence that creates a pine cone, that what's been done with the humans is atrocious.
Yeah.
It's horrible. And it's time for them, us as a species, to wake up to our true nature
Hmm.
and to heal. And I call it creating a new core in this herd. I don't like, I like the idea of America. That's cool.
Hmm.
I don't like what it is. I don't like what how it betrays people
Yeah.
tremendously. But as a herd, it needs to be healed and have a new core developed because time is going to pass either way.
Hmm.
So either we can try, we're here for a reason and a mission. And I think we have a little more gusto than the average. This is not to insult anybody, but the person that's out amongst the trees, letting their hair grow, being all natural and just being a human, embracing nature, they're not looking for a mission. Whereas our souls, we feel lost without a mission. I know
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
And so when you get awakened up spiritually, and then you're given a mission, your soul jumps for joy. And you're like, yes,
Yeah.
I got this. Because the truth is, like, not everybody wants the path of a warrior,
Hmm.
and not everybody will pick up that mantle because it sucks. It's a lonely road.
Yeah.
And with how you overshared, I'll overshare. I've gotten used to seeing entities,
Hmm.
and they will be below people or attached to people or massive ones moving in that realm that have control over somebody. And they gain control through trauma
Yep.
and through witchcraft and occulted rituals where they get it energetically attached. And now this entity can energetically operate through them.
Yeah.
So I've gotten so used to that. It's just normal for me. And I see these silver orbs appear where I'll feel this like angelic, energetic brush on my cheek when I'm doing the right thing. And
Yeah.
it feels like ecstasy.
Hmm.
And so there's all these supernatural happenings that I'm getting used to and just
Processing.
incorporating and not telling people.
Yeah.
But again, like you
Except for
said,
right now where we're putting it out and for public
you know,
consumption.
and this takes a level of bravery, I think,
Yeah.
of not being afraid of judgment.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And again, you're right. Like there's a very fine line between oversharing and alienating everybody, but sharing enough that those having similar experiences can find community and answers. I really liked what you're saying about the soldier arc or the warrior. I want to be clear. I want to call it the warrior archetype versus a soldier archetype. Uh, I'm a big fan of Carl Jung and Jungian psychology, and he's the one that pretty much introduced, the idea of archetypes to psychology. And particularly, like you said, I believe that there is a sacred role in the divine masculine of a warrior. Now, it's not to say that everybody needs to go and be a warrior. I think that there's times in your life where you can be warrior-like you might be an insurance salesman, for example, but still have a warrior mentality, like with protecting your family, your tribe, things like that. But yeah, I do believe that the warrior archetype is a sacred divine masculine role. And I do believe that, in my opinion, and I'll share this with you and I guess for your comment. In my opinion, I believe that the global war on terror, I mean, it consumed 20 years of our nation's, resources, money and wealth and blood and energy and everything like that. And essentially, I believe it produced a massive generation or population of men and women who uh, suffered horrendous amounts of trauma and who ultimately that trauma will be, I think, the catalyst for large scale awakenings throughout society. And then furthermore, I guess I'm asking you a two-part question. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And then secondly, I guess this is more of just a comment to yours, like you say, like, well, yeah, I love this country. This country's great. I agree with you with that sentiment. I'm not anti-US by any means. I mean, I signed up to lay down my life for this country. I think I'm more of in a place of like seeing any country for that matter as separation. Like at the end of the day, we're all just human beings and we're all just part of nature. And sometimes I feel like our national ideals or our national priorities get us in trouble like globally when I think a lot of the problems we're wrestling with are global problems, not necessarily national problems, and we're trying to solve them from a finite pie. But I guess that's just more of a tangent, me rambling. But yeah, like what are your thoughts about the trauma and the veteran situation?
So I believe that the trauma, everything is good and bad, good and evil.
Yeah,
The trauma makes you seek something you would have never sought if you had had a perfect life.
yeah.
You would have been perfectly wrapped in ego, chasing whatever you're told to chase in this society and thinking you're okay. Because in a sense, you are okay. But the trauma makes you look inwards at some point in time you want to escape that pain. You want to escape that suffering and you seek, and it puts you on the path of seeking, and seek and you shall find. We're supposed to go within. Nothing happens externally, actually. All of our history in life is recorded in here.
Hmm.
I don't believe the memories are in the brain. They're in the mind or externally, and they get pulled in, and the brain's the biomechanical processing unit to process that. But when we start looking inward, we would have never done that without the trauma. So what people saw as sometimes, I think as a lot of people, they're like copy and paste. They were traumatized, they get triggered and they re-traumatize. And then they ignore that facet of their being because the person that traumatizes you, if you live close with them, they never acknowledge it and they act like it's not real. So then you totally ignore that side of you, but now it's part of you. You have that capacity and capability. We're
Yeah.
all capable of evil, but that evil is given a structure once we're shown how to harness that in an event. So we're capable of it, but we ignore that. But this leads us down the journey of looking inwards. And to me personally, if I had not have been through so much pain and trauma, which was meant for evil, but ultimately it served good for the fact that it was not maybe a fulcrum, but a proponent maybe, or a propellant of my awakening.
Hmm.
But then also I have walked a path and it's like you're walking on a land nav course and you have to get through this bramble that lasts 1,500 meters. And there's a mountain and hills and you're in the valley and there's mud and it's swampy and you literally, all you can do is remember like your azimuth and just keep trudging through. You can see no landmarks. You're bloody. You're by yourself. I've been able to remember what the azimuth was in the distance to give that. And that's a metaphor for a structure of like, hey, follow this. You can get through this. It's miserable, but you're going to have to go deep inside.
Yeah.
And then that steps into, I believe that I was in the first wave. I know there's other awakenings, but I think there's waves of awakenings and certain individuals that are willing to step up. That's like, there's certain souls that are like, oh, that soul will keep going. And I don't know if I've about the whole theory of volunteering for these lives. I don't know. It sounds cool, but it's like a reverse spy for the spiritual realm. Like, okay, I'm going to put this person in this place, in this herd. They're going to get all of this experience and then wake them up when it's time for battle. So
Hmm.
it's like we're triggering this hole basically. So it's like imagine you have a sleeper agent, Jason Bourne. He acts like an idiot. You put him in a country for 30 years and then you trigger him. And then
Hmm.
here comes this ultimate assassin and it's a reverse spy. But here we get all of this experience. Then our souls are triggered through awakening. And then we're like, ooh, here's how others can navigate this.
Yeah.
So then I believe that there's going to be mass awakenings soon. I don't know any time frame. This is just a feeling in my bones, but I know how to help somebody navigate that awakening much faster because it took me years.
Yeah.
But because of my experience, and I did instructing for a while, and I put together some courses here and there, and I started paying attention to the phases that I was going through. I was paying attention to modalities were getting me through that. And I was like, oh, I can put this together as a framework for somebody else. Because the thing is, if mass awakenings start, it'll be chaos
Mm.
and they're going to be seeking and they're going to be looking. Religion's going to reject them. The psych wards, the psychiatrists and psychologists and counselors are going to reject them.
Hmm.
And I believe that's a broken system designed to keep people broken.
Yep.
And awakening, though, you have to go in, look at the character that you want to play now as a human. You're awake to it. You're like, I can, like, basically, we're an energy portal in this realm and we're energy output.
Yeah.
And our character structures that energy output. And our intentions give a signature to that energy output. And then we get to choose. Now that I can blatantly see who I was and who I am as a character or ego, I know blatantly how to energetically interact with another human and what is the best way.
Yeah.
I now know I want good for other people and I'm not going to be petty. I'm not going to try to get back at people anymore.
Yeah.
And that takes a while because you have to reprogram the brain. So I believe there's going to be mass awakenings and people are going to be seeking, and that there are people that were dropped in first that are like, hey, this way.
Yeah, I think it's going to be exponential, like I think like if you were to graph it, it's going to be kind of slow at first. It is being slow at first, and then it's going to start to, tick up and it is going to grow exponentially and there'll be a tipping point. Again, like I said, I used to just think like that's the one thing I want for everybody in my inner, like my inner circle, my family, my circle of friends to have an awakening. But I've also realized that not everybody will awake. While there will be mass awakenings, not everybody will opt in or choose into it. And that's okay too. Like that's another beautiful part of the plan, that everybody has their own sovereignty and gets to choose their own path. I want to circle back to something we've talked about, in one respect, in one vision, you saw like a dark entity in a corner that was, kind of representative. And I don't think we've used this word yet on this episode, but we've talked about shadow. Or I like one of the principles in this work is shadow. We talk about the yin and the yang. You've brought that up. My belief is that our shadow is those things that we came in to work on, those things that we came in to master, to be better at in this lifetime than in previous. And because I am on board with what you're saying about incarnation, multiple incarnations, reincarnation. I look at shadow as a real blessing in our lives, actually. I think that one of the dangers that we get into or that we fall into is the trap of believing that, like, I have to rid myself of my shadow. I don't think that you can. I think that your shadow is your shadow. I think that there's a very narrow line down the middle where if we feed our shadow too much, it has power over us. But if we try to ignore it and stifle it, it holds that same power over us. Like either way that you try to work with it, either by bringing it to the surface or burying it, is as equally dangerous. I think that the key with the shadow is to acknowledge it and then just to not let it, just to let it be and not to do anything with it. What are your thoughts?
First thing that pops to mind is religion has it all wrong. They call shadow your sin nature,
Yeah.
and they say that you have to hate it. God hates it. Then that fractures a person by them hating part of who they are. Then that locks them into religion of always being unworthy and bringing this person back. When in reality, that is part of our existence. That's part of who we are. We couldn't fight a war without our shadow side. If we're, you know how you have some guys that are just, they're like a rose petal. They're just kind, they're soft, and they're just a great person, but it's just this kind, soft human who is just going through life being a kind person. But then I think the shadow side is what allows us to step in and do necessary harm, which, as from the experience of a soldier, it is necessary at times. But as just a human, like that's when you're being used by your government, it's like anything's blessed off on there. But now, as just being a human, it's important to love that side and
Yeah.
be like, because you're saying if we completely reject it or completely embrace it and let it out, then that's going to hurt other people. Because I
Yeah.
see our shadow side as the evil or the balance, It's like I don't like to use the word good and evil really, because it's like these two energies that are received, and how are they received? In a destructive manner, a building manner, but you can have a firm building manner. And
Hmm.
that firm building manner is supported by the darkness and the light. And so, like I was saying, it's like you lead with the light, and then that darkness, the shadow side, is the one that's pushing, staying firm. It's like, hey, we're going to continue on this mission, even though things are sucking. Everything looks like it's collapsing. We've lost all of our supplies. We're going to keep pushing forwards.
Yeah.
You can use that side that's just brutal, but I've learned that I have to love it and accept it and not try to reject it and be like, this is part of who I am. Because if I reject that side and treat
Hmm.
it like with disdain,
Hmm.
or I don't want it, it's going to rebel and pop out.
Well,
I'm going to
yeah.
repress it. And it's going to be like, "You, dude, I'm going to pop out when you don't like it." But it's like, hey, you're part of who I am and I'll love you.
And like you said, it is part of us. Our shadows are part of our nature. Those are part of what makes us who we are. So any amount of, like you said, disdain or hate or whatever, we're only just turning that on ourselves. Like every bit of our shadows have to be loved. That's really the only way we can really find unconditional love for ourselves, is by loving all the parts of us, even the parts of us that society or religion or anybody else would tell us to reject, to hate. It's dirty, it's icky, it's whatever, sinful. Yeah, like I don't, like even if we go back to like basic Christian belief, like we were made in the image of God and God is perfect. Like, does like shouldn't that be the end of it right there? Shouldn't I be able to love myself despite all of my quote unquote flaws? Um, I believe we should. Yeah, I think you make a really good point there. I want to transition. I know that we talked about like you brought up that, you were an instructor on the shooting course, and instruction is something that's very near and dear to your heart, I guess I would say. I know that you have some courses. I want to give you some platform, some time to share more about your platform. And I know that you have a deep connection with some ancient, let's call it technology, and see if you want to elaborate on that.
So I guess I'll start with the big bridge that I had to span or build was when I was going through awakening. We've probably said awakening 100 times by now. And my soul was present, and I knew how my soul wanted to present this world, but my brain was programmed differently. I had to bridge that gap because I had to go in and question all of these core beliefs that I was never allowed to question. And then I had to reprogram them.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, that was not fun at all. But it was a challenge that I was ready to take up. And it was basically as I started down this journey, I would get these downloads basically because in the unifying field, all data and information exists.
Hmm.
Like when we have ideas or dreams, it comes from somewhere. And to think that this little bitty human in the macro, the chasm or the expanse of the universe came up with this genius thing in this brain as a speck is pretty arrogant. I truly believe it's like we get given knowledge if it's known that we will deliver it
Mm.
and that we can put it into a digestible format.
Yeah.
So I started going in, I was like, how do I become a different character or change who I am in a sense? Like I'm still me, but I need to change my energy output because the energy goes up the spine to the brain and then it gets formed and is given different codes and is put through our mouths and we shape that energy in words and in our actions. And then the intentions are signatures within that. So I needed to change all of that because I was a bit of a douchebag in some ways. Like I wanted to do good, but I had a lot of sides of me. I had a lot of areas that were triggerable by family members that I'd mentioned.
Hmm.
I had a lot of responses that were just crappy. I had these dreams, but I was like, I have to become, how do I become that character that's on the other end of this that brings that dream to fulfillment?
Hmm.
So people talk about manifestation, like manifest your money, manifest your dream life. But manifesting is seeing an image in your mind, then finding what you need to build it here, or
Yeah.
finding the people that believe in your dream because it's for the good of humanity. So in developing a character, first I had to figure out what character I wanted to be, visualize that. And then I was given the intuition to like research symbols. So I started learning about symbology and symbols. And ultimately, I came up with a symbol can hold a ton of data in the brain
Mm.
where you see a symbol and all this data populates. So I was like, wait a second. If I create a personal symbol and then I create all this data and an image that I have built out mine of the character I want to be, they'll be connected. If it's this original symbol that I've never seen, and every time I read this data, I connect it with this. Then when I think about the symbol, my character populates internally. And our identity is a feeling, essentially. It's like how we feel.
Hmm.
So we start putting that on. So I went crazy. I use the term crazy in a rational sense. I drew my symbol on the mirror in the bathroom. I put it in my car. I put it on my phone, on my computer, and I drew it every single night just obsessing about the character I wanted to become. It's basically what it took. And so I developed the character trigger. It involves feeding, well, that's in the classroom portion, but the character trigger involves breathing, a tapping spot,
Mm.
a symbol, a character sheet, and imagery.
Wow.
Through this protocol, you connect. So when you learn something new, you connect to all that stuff in one spot in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a tapping spot, a symbol, and a character sheet and breath work, you program it together. All those things trigger each other.
Yeah.
So your breath work can trigger your symbol in your mind. Your symbol triggers that character data. Then your tapping can trigger the symbol in your mind.
Yeah.
That triggers the character data. So this becomes a tool. So let's say you have these old markers in your brain of old ways of acting. It's like energy goes up this pathway and triggers this bad behavior or a behavior you no longer want.
Yeah.
Like
Like,
let's
let's
say
say
it's,
addiction.
yeah, or let's say crashing out.
Okay.
It's like your wife picks at you and you're like, "Ah," and she's like, see, he's a bad guy. It's like, I don't want to crash out anymore. Or the addiction. That is energy going to a spot in the brain, activating processes for your body to do these things. So when you program in the character trigger, it's in a new marker in the brain. So the old pathway is really well worn in, but when you activate your character trigger, you send the energy and your awareness to this new marker that you've programmed in. So now you're bringing your energy away from the old pathway to a new center where it puts on an identity and you have this codex you've programmed in of your behavior that you want. And you're like, okay, I'm going to operate from this now.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you're operating from that new character and you're building a new neural pathway
Yeah.
to connect to that new behavior.
100%.
So here's a big part of my work to help people is, and I'm new to all this again, like I'm new, this is a whole new arena I'm new to. They need to learn how to feed their brain well, the proper nutrients. They need to give it the proper fuel, plenty of water, because if you have a contractor building an exit on a highway without any materials, he can't build that exit. What people are wanting to do with a new action is to build an exit from that neural pathway. You don't have the nutrients to build that exit, you are wasting your time.
Yeah.
You might be able to perform that action that's programmed in as a marker, but if you want to make sure it's automatic behavior, you got to allow your brain to have access to the building blocks to build those pathways in there. And I call it thinking small. Were you going to say something?
Yeah. I was just gonna maybe restate it just in slightly different terms. Those that have followed along before may have heard me talking about a lot, because what I hear you saying is that, like, breath work, for example, drops us into neuroplastic state. Tapping is a neuroplastic state. For those of you who may not have heard neuroplastic state before, essentially it's the same thing as post psychedelic ceremony, where your brains become pliable and flexible again. Like you mentioned it, you talk about those deep ruts, right? Like when somebody's crushing out, there's a pattern, an addiction, a habit there that your brains are used to going in a particular fashion. It's what you're telling me, what I'm hearing you say, is that this is built on the framework of the neurons that fire together, or that fire together, wire together, and creating new neural pathways and you're anchoring it with these symbols and the meaning behind the symbols. So, like, it really resonates deeply with me, because, like, this is a lot of what we talk about on the show is ways, because I'll be the first to tell you, like, a psychedelic experience is not the point. A psychedelic experience gives you insight into your problems, insight into the solutions to your problems, and 30 days of neuroplasticity to layer in new habits to solve those problems for the long term. And to me, this is a little bit of what you're saying sounds kind of like a shortcut or achieving the same means without the psychedelics, but still getting the neuroplasticity and rewiring.
So it's funny you say that because uh, I have been learning a little bit about these rituals and the psychedelics and these events that people go to that change them fundamentally. And I watched one of your videos the other day where you're talking about wait 30 days to make any decisions.
Yeah.
And then I got to thinking about this program would honestly work perfect right after that to be like, okay, here's where you wake up. You have the neuroplasticity. Here, let's give you a framework to start structuring the way you want to be now. And that just came to me the other day, and I was like, ooh, cool. But the care and the way you explained it's awesome. Like, that's cool that you grasp it because I've talked to some people and they're just like they're coming from a clinical standpoint and they're like, well, they have no concept of it. The character trigger is just the beginning phase. The next phase, and so like to look at the character trigger, your brain is like a mushroom. It can morph and mold, and your awareness and ideas and the way you think in your mind shape those pathways. And so if you do think a certain way over and over and over, that's like putting a mold on a cookie and creating something in there. Thoughts and these structures are putting a mold in your brain to reform it, which is pretty cool. So then the next step of the character trigger is the mental library. And that is basically setting up an operating system for your soul to work inside your brain. So you can go in and you can, with the deeper work I teach also, is you can implant this character that you've created in old traumatic memories.
Mm-hmm.
When you it's called reformatting memories. So then you know how you have these old memories come up. You can, or somebody watching, and you feel like that hurt child again for a few days. Or you're like, I was around my dad and I just felt like a helpless little boy. Or my mom just has to say one thing and I feel like this just idiot again. That is a feeling of identity, and memories can do that. So when we address the metadata that's in a memory and we set up the platform properly in your operating system, in your brain, because you're always making a memory of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to go into all the detail, but when you reformat a memory, you change the metadata in the memory. So let's say the memory
Mm-hmm.
pops up and it sends a signal to the brain to say, activate this process, increase heart rate, activate this process to say these words, activate these other memories, activate this identity, and activate these feelings. That's metadata in that memory sending signals to activate processes in the brain. So when you reformat the memories, you change all that metadata.
Yeah.
Now the metadata says calm mind, highest version of your identity that you've created in the character trigger, stability, breath work,
Yep.
and your system goes calm. So you're changing those triggers for chaos. And I wish people could understand this. And want people to know this, that you have these processes activated in your brain, but you can change the triggers where you get triggered into calmness
Mm-hmm.
and you get triggered into the highest version of yourself. You get triggered into a peaceful mind. So literally you can turn these old memories into your most powerful, pivotal stories in your history book of your life.
Yeah.
So when you access them, you're just like getting more powerful. Instead of putting on that old identity, you put on the new identity. You're like, oh fuck yeah. It's like, hey,
Yeah. Well, you're elaborating on something that I find, and like there's a little bit of danger in sharing this because I think that people won't grasp the nuance of it, and so I'm asking the listeners to listen with curiosity and I guess grace a little bit. But one of the things that I didn't elaborate on earlier in the discussion was talking about your trauma. Now, there's a book out there called The Wounded Healer, and essentially it makes the argument that people who've been through a tremendous amount of trauma. I mean, we already talked about the disassociation from a place of my ego protecting me or your ego protecting you. But disassociation is very closely related to the ability to disassociate in trance-like states, like in shamanic work. So I guess what I'm gently saying, and not to trivialize anybody's trauma on any level, but our trauma does shape us, and a lot of times those of us that have suffered severe trauma, it shapes us into healers. And so that's another thing that's really coming up for me as you're talking about this is just this idea that it unlocked these gifts and this knowledge within you that now we can actually turn into tools to help other people going through similar processes to heal, to get well, to awaken, etc.
Yeah. And but just to summarize, like the work I do, it's very structured
Yeah.
and it takes several weeks to build out certain parts before the person's ready to do that deeper work. They have to
Yeah.
be in a solid place. So it starts out with the character trigger, the mental library, encoding tomorrow, the the mental spiral cycle, and some of them I'm not saying all the words correctly that I have them named for. And then they can get into the human startup protocol, which works perfectly with encoding tomorrow. You mess with time a little bit in your mind, and then you can get into reformatting the memories.
Hmm.
But then all of this starts structuring your thought processes or the person's thought processes to reformatting how their brain operates and accesses memories.
Yeah.
So it's really deep work. It takes effort, but
Yeah.
on the other end of it, it gives a quiet mind. Like for somebody watching, like imagine if your mind was quiet. You didn't have any inner dialogue, but only what you chose. And you could access how you pulled up memories and you could uh, just control what's going on in your mind, which is the biggest part about being an autonomous human. You're and you should be in control of your biomechanical processing unit, the brain.
Well, and I really deeply value that as well, just the idea that this is work. I think that, society has conditioned us to want shortcuts and want instant gratification and want dopamine and all those things, when in fact the reality is in doing the work. Again, like I say, when people come to a psychedelic ceremony, one of the things that we do is we work hard to dispel the myth that ceremony is the finish line, when the reality is the ceremony is the starting line. And when they walk out of that ceremony and go home, that's when the real work begins. So I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront too. I always tell people that usually the amount of effort that it takes to get out of their abyss is usually equal to the amount of effort it took to get into the abyss, which is a lot for some of us.
Well, it's like getting put into a labyrinth of torture.
Mhm.
You make it out of that labyrinth. It may take an incredibly long time because you're going down the wrong paths. You're having to backtrack, but you remembered it. And then you can tell people, hey, here's how to get out of that labyrinth. And so the wounded healer, it's like, I could have never helped somebody else or have that empathy if I wasn't wounded because it's like when I was still dealing with PTSD from the war, I didn't want to talk to a therapist or a psychologist that was not a veteran that had combat experience. Did not. But the second when I would be drunk driving around, this old Vietnam vet who was a SEAL, he would come pick me up and take me to Waffle House like at 2 in the morning and drink coffee with me until I was sobered up. And we didn't have to talk. He knew.
Yeah.
There was this bridge that was there. So the wounded healer has all of these bridges going out and be like, I know, I know, I know, you know, let's
Yeah.
follow me.
Awesome. Well, hey, Paul, I want to, first of all, for those listening, I will put a link to Paul's program in the comments below, so you can find that on your own and check out his work some more. I just want to kick it over to you for any sort of final thoughts, comments, anything you feel like we left unsaid?
Pain and suffering is miserable, and you can be in a dark place, and you can feel like you just want to give up, and there's no end to your misery and suffering. This is an invitation to look inwards. This is an invitation to start really thinking about who you are, and to remember this, that you were there with yourself every step of the way. Everybody else might have let you down, but you've been there with yourself. And that shows you how strong you are. So wherever you are, seek and ye shall find. You are strong and you are powerful. And you cannot know sweetness without bitterness without sweetness. Like, this allows you a new level of humility in life and a new lens to view the world in. It's not easy and it's not fun, but it's a it's a it's a journey.
But it is the
Definitely.
reason we're here.
Yes.
Beautiful. I appreciate that. I think that's a great place for us to wrap it up. Lots of good wisdom, lots of great invitations for people to, to do their work, to consider spirit, where they are in their spiritual awakening, to seek tools, to turn inside, when it comes to these traumas, to this pain, to this suffering. Again, one more quick word from our sponsors, Larabelle and the Crazy Tree, a story about embracing your authentic self, which I think aligns with a lot about what we're talking about today. 100% of the proceeds of the sale of this book, go to Donor Connect, which helps save lives with organ donation. Secondly is From Green Beret to Shamanism, One Man's Journey to Heal. 100% of the proceeds of this book go to putting veterans into ayahuasca ceremonies and helping them recover and heal. And then finally, Olipop, big fan of the drink and what they're doing to help us build a better relationship with soda. Very low sugar. I think this one only has 2 grams of sugar per can. All natural, prebiotics, botanicals, and plant fiber, all for a healthy gut. Paul, thank you for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story. Thank you for your courage and, putting it out there for our audience. I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. All right.